Hello everyone on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about Cdiscount. In fact, Cdiscount is a company where I worked for a year between 2018, mid-2018 and mid-2019. I even found the contract I had at the time. Of course, it was a professionalization contract because I was doing a work-study program there. So there you have it. I basically worked at Cdiscount during the period. Well, let's go take a look at their traffic on RFs because the situation has definitely changed since the time I was there. But basically, I worked between September, October, more or less October 2018, and until August 2019, until I left. After that, it was Malta for me. And today we're going to reveal a bit to you the secrets of Cdiscount, all the major things you need to know about SEO, and the reason why they've been in free fall for several months, even years now. So basically, Cdiscount, I was there starting from that point. So roughly, we're talking about August 2018 until around September 2019. So that was a period when we had about 20 million in organic traffic, which is huge. Very few companies managed to get that kind of traffic. And my role as an apprentice was relatively minor. So quite simply, I had tasks that were a bit repetitive, not necessarily very exciting. Like when a category was targeting the wrong keyword, I had to change it so it would target the right one. I'll give you an example. Let's imagine, for example, that pyrolysis oven wasn't the keyword. The specific keyword that was carefully targeted was electric oven with pyrolysis function. People actually searched for pyrolysis oven. For example, I'd change oven with pyrolysis function to pyrolysis oven. That was the kind of task I was doing. I also ordered the little text you see right here. We called that the drop-down text area. That was one of my tasks indeed, to order those little texts. And so I could also put forward technical suggestions for the site, which obviously had to go through a good part of the team, the technical leads, who would assess the relevance of my suggestions and prioritize them. And if ever it was prioritized, it would then be developed by the SEO development team at Cdiscount, and then it would be put into production. I had quite a lot of little tasks like that, which existed and which I could choose to do in different time slots. I was even responsible for certain departments in particular. I remember the department for the silver economy. So let's say the departments that were focused on mobile phones for people over 70, adult diapers, things like that. Pretty fun, actually, when you're an 18, 19 or 20-year-old kid to find yourself assigned to that department. But well, it was a department that was relatively unimportant where I could have some fun. So it was cool to be assigned to that department. The questions we're going to ask ourselves now are, what are the real secrets of Cdiscount? What are the things that Cdiscount does differently from other e-commerce sites, or at least what did they used to do differently? What were their major strengths and what have they lost in all of this? The first thing to know is that when I was working on Cdiscount, it was more at a time when this site looked like this, with this menu here, rather than like this, which is more the current version. You can also see, by the way, that this was the version that was around in 2022. So here, as you can see, I took April 2022. This is the version that was around in 2024. You can see that there was a point where there was a shift in the traffic. So there you go. In 2022 and 2023, we were still on this version. In 2024, we're on this one. So we've lost a huge amount of traffic. If on top of that, we distinguish between branded and non-branded traffic, which I'm going to do right now, you'll see that the situation is particularly dramatic in the sense that historically, back when I was working there, we had a share of traffic. Branded versus non-branded, where we had almost 10 million in traffic. Branded traffic for 10 to 12 million and non-branded traffic. And over time, the branded traffic increased a little bit. But the non-branded traffic dropped. So we ended up with an SEO traffic share that's in free fall. Basically, the real SEO traffic is plummeting. Actually, if you look at it this way, it's even more striking. You can see that now the numbers really aren't great compared to what we had historically when we had over 10 million in branded traffic. By the way, the SEO team at Cdiscount actually set their targets based on branded traffic. How did we calculate branded traffic? We calculated the traffic, all the site's traffic, except for the homepage traffic. So basically, we removed the homepage traffic and calculated everything else. Honestly, it was easier to calculate it this way rather than using the data. From Search Console, trying to remove all the variations of names, words, Cdiscounts, etc. We knew that the vast majority of branded traffic, the overwhelming majority, landed on the homepage. So the objectives were all the traffic on all pages except the homepage. That's how it was calculated. The team itself was made up of quite a few members. By the way, at the time, I don't know if that's still the case now because a large part of the Cdiscount team was poached gradually to go and form the Mano Mano team. In fact, the Mano Mano team, even now to some extent, though a bit less so, but in 2020, roughly speaking, a very large part of the Cdiscount team had been brought over and was working there. You'll find quite a few things at Mano Mano that we used to have at Cdiscount and so on. These are two companies that are very close to each other, both major players in e-commerce. So it's not surprising that they inspire each other and that they share members of the same teams. By the way, when I arrived at Cdiscount's SEO department, it was Vincent Amanik who was managing SEO. He left during my year as an apprentice and went on to manage elsewhere. SEO and in fact all digital marketing at Mano Mano. So you can really feel that there was a lot of inspiration taken from there. He was someone who was extremely competent. By the way, Vincent, if you see this video, thanks again for the opportunity. Now let's talk about the things that made Cdiscount successful, because that's really what's interesting. How did Cdiscount end up with 25 million in traffic, including 15 million non-branded, even though the domain is obviously powerful? It has a lot of product pages, etc., of course, but above all, there were technical optimizations that were spot on, extremely detailed. So there's something I want to talk to you about that's interesting, something that Mr. Remy Nastasio, who is an acquaintance of mine, has already talked about a lot at the time. By the way, and actually, it's about the top pages, the pages that perform best on Cdiscount. You'll see what they look like, but these are pages that are created automatically. So this is what we call search indexing. It's something that Google frowns upon, that it always says you shouldn't do because it's the creation of automated pages, etc. But basically, it's something that will generate a lot of pages and pages that perform extremely well. You'll see it. Now, there aren't that many left, but back in the day, it was packed. We only had search text pages. Let's go look at some older stuff because recently they've gradually been emptied out. There are fewer of them and they're less powerful. But typically, these are all the pages that have R at the end of their URL. This R here means that the pages are generated automatically. How was this automatic generation system set up? Pretty simply, if someone did a search, here, for example, Redmi Note 13 Pro in the search engine, or for instance, back when hand spinners were popular, we had a page that was generated. In this case, it wasn't indexable initially. But if someone went there, made a purchase, thought, okay, this LED bar is interesting, this fidget spinner is what I want to buy. They bought that item, received it, were happy, and everything went smoothly. In general, the exact process was A did a search. Upon purchase, a page was generated automatically, provided, of course, that it wasn't already in the hierarchy, and as long as we weren't dealing with something that was poorly written. If we weren't dealing with a theme that was somewhat pornographic, or if it wasn't a brand name, so there were a lot of criteria that the algorithm would check. And if all the criteria were met, we would generate a page. This meant that pages were being created in a completely uncontrolled way, but ahead of the entire market, since we were on a marketplace with a huge number of offers every time we had supply. Thank you. And if someone made a purchase, it meant there was market interest in generating that page. So what happened is that there were a huge number of pages that were created. In this case, I gave you the example of Redmi Note 13 Pro. But if we do something, I'll show you an example that's pretty fun. We'll go fetch all of them directly. We'll look for URL container, and then we'll see all the pages that were generated automatically. This was 2 years ago. If we look even further back, it was even funnier. There were even more things. But we've got a bit of everything: air fryer, iPhone 16 Pro Max, etc. This obviously caused problems. For example, air fryer, in my opinion, they have a version with a Y, a version with an I, and that creates some complexities that lead to duplication and issues like that. Here, for example, doll, that's not really the kind of thing we want to be associated with. IPTV subscription, same thing. We know that's not the kind of thing we want to be involved with. But since it was generated automatically, we ended up in those categories. So this search indexing strategy created a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of problems. You can also watch talks by Remy Nastasio or Cécile Beroni, who was in charge of Rakuten and also had a lot of problems with this. If we look even further back, at the time I had access to the search console, and one of the most searched pages was RAXNXN, which was actually a misspelling, a typo of the site XNXX, which is a pornographic website. And so since someone had made a purchase and it wasn't exactly the name of a porn site, it slipped through and we ended up with a page that was created which ranked in the top 10 for the keyword XNXN. As a result, there was a huge volume of traffic coming in and being clicked on, etc. We don't recommend the automated system for everyone, but it's one of those very, very powerful things that was put in place, and something that, in my opinion, is important and that we need to keep in mind as inspiration is that you simply have to monitor your internal search, have an internal search module that is really well designed. And if you have a lot of searches, a high volume, go and monitor it, look for opportunities, observe how people are typing in keywords. And if people are using internal search, it might mean that our site structure isn't as well designed as we thought. So maybe we should review the UX and UI of our site structure to make sure that, if there are internal searches for terms where we shouldn't be seeing internal searches, or if that's how it's being handled. And if we have internal searches for items that we don't have in stock, maybe we should consider stocking those products because our audience is interested in them and so on. Just so you know, these are services we now offer since I manage an SEO agency. So if you have any questions about your internal search and how to use it, leverage it as a lever to generate more sales, don't hesitate to contact us. That's what we're here for. Now we're going to move on to a second part. That was the really big opportunity. I could talk to you for hours about the Zexing part, but let's move on to the second thing, which is the failure of the sales discounts migration from an SEO point of view. So what happened is that historically, these discounts looked like this. Here, the more experienced ones, especially Patrick Valibus, who had studied the internal linking of these discounts in depth, could explain to you, and I will do so today as well, how these discounts had this whole internal linking system with the categories, etc. And so there was cloaking and link obfuscation involved in all this. So in fact, the version that Google saw was not the same as the version that users saw. And what happened was that all the internal linking was done from the homepage. So everything was discoverable from the homepage. Then what happened was that when you went into a category, you had the main categories, then the subcategories. And basically, from an obfuscation point of view, it meant that if you were... So I'll try to give you an example. Let's go directly to the bike tires and inner tubes. The CSS is broken. Let's go to another page that's a bit better. What happened, the way this obfuscation, this cloaking was managed, I'll show you on a page without CSS, which will allow us to see a bit what it looked like. And that's quite interesting. So you can see that the entire menu was actually loaded in JavaScript. And so all this part here with the entire menu, since the menu is huge, there are a ton of things in the menu. All of that, a really, really big part, was loaded in JavaScript, which meant that basically there were no outgoing links. And when you ended up here, what were you on? In this case, the laundromat, I think. I think the washing machines, that's it. Well, we didn't have all the links that were here. So you see, we only had the links that were most important to us. We have the links that go down a bit. So actually we have the silent washes, connected ones, etc. We have the links. We can scroll back up a bit on this section. Washing, drying, and home appliances. And we have some interesting things here, but we don't have the entire menu identified or present. So from an obfuscation point of view, we end up with something that's actually pretty well done. As soon as we find ourselves in a category, we don't leave that category. We go deeper into it. We go in. It's interesting, but we don't come out anymore. We don't switch, and we don't find ourselves with a link from the silent washing machines to potentially a link. So let's go see what's there now. But to hand spinners, for example, to things that are completely unrelated. Since we're on a very large e-commerce site with a huge variety of products, phones don't necessarily have to link to video games, etc. And so this obfuscation system that was implemented was extremely well done with parent blocks and then child blocks. It's an architecture that is extremely well designed. There's also something quite interesting here. We're going to look at what we called indexable facets. So beyond the search indexing page generation system, we also had indexable facets. So if we look here, we can see that there were specific links on the 6 kilos or less facet. So if someone clicked on this 6 kilos or less facet, they would be taken to a new page, which is also indexable, focused on washing machines of 6 kilos or less. So in fact, this allowed us to have this faceted system, which is kind of a native, easy to use system for e-commerce, but also to have this URL aspect, Google, where in fact, we're going to index this facet. Obviously, we didn't want to index everything. And that's why you'll see here, for example, with brands, sometimes there's a link and sometimes there isn't. So sometimes the facets were managed in JavaScript and adjusted directly. The filter was applied and we ended up with a new page with a new top 50 products that were only from the brand, for example, Asco. But since we knew from the SEO side that there was no search demand for Asco, what we did was not open indexable facets for it. So in fact, it was not possible to index the Asco facet. What we did instead was open, for example, Beko or Bosch, because we knew there was search demand for those. So here, for example, we can see this quite clearly, and it's pretty cool to see exactly. Without CSS, the facets that were indexable, for example, all the kilos, we did it. The prices, we didn't do it. There we had some, so that's pretty crazy because we actually had a bit of a problem there. Washing capacity, drying capacity. We had problems sometimes with facets that were a bit similar, but not really. Brands, we had opened about half of them. Colors, we very rarely opened, except for clothes, for example, etc. All of that is the indexable faceting system. It was something that was very interesting and allowed us to refine the tree with the search terms that were being searched for, that were being used. And so in particular for all the brands, we would open the ones that were interesting, but not all of them, etc. Because Cdiscount was a site that had 50 million pages. So if we had opened up all the combinations of facets, we would have created an infinite number of pages that would have been impossible to cross-reference. For example, if it's possible to have iPad plus 200 to 500 euros plus all that, we know that's not possible. We would end up with an infinite number of pages that Google simply couldn't handle. So we had to pay attention to our crawl budget. And so we only opened the facets that were important and interesting, those searched for by users. So there you go. It was the same thing for the brands. And we'll see one thing in particular, which is that, as you saw, the tree structure was well blocked. It was well obfuscated. But from the homepage, everything was visible. And that was interesting. What happens now, actually, since the update was made to the new format, is that I've tested several times, especially with the bot, directly with Google. So you can see directly from the Google bot. But the thing is, none of the pages, the whole menu, is visible at all. It's all managed directly in JavaScript. And as a result, we end up with pages that are not visible. So actually, the big problem we have here in this case is that Google can no longer crawl inside the site. It is forced to go directly. Navigating through the menu no longer works at all. Here, in this case, we're using the rich snippet module. I searched for V107-0, which is the largest category this time on. The V107-0 is the main category for IT. You can find it here. Look here, this link is for V107-0, so it's one of the biggest categories. That one, for sure. If you look directly here, you can see that it's present in a small JavaScript module hidden at the bottom. But we don't have a standard clean href link to this category, so we end up with it from the home page. Actually, most of the categories aren't interlinked, so you might think, okay, why not? It's a strategy. They don't want to spread the link juice around. I don't think it's a good strategy, but why not? And behind that, we could have, for example, maybe modules, blocks here, etc., where we might decide that we want to promote the products. But what happens with these products? So the products themselves, there's no problem. We might think about those categories. Those categories, just for your information, so the types of pages, as you might imagine at Siskun, were letters. The problem with those pages is that they are not indexable. Here, for the pet store sales, that's the case. Normally, this one is indexable, but if we take another one, we'll see that there are some that are not indexable. There you go. If we go back to it, we reload. Only DIY, by the way, it should have been the same for the pet store. They are not indexable. Why are those pages not indexable? They are created by another department, which is not the SEO department. And as a result, we end up with pages that are created on the fly by people we have less control over and who need to do marketing on the site. So the way we solved that problem, it's not as if I was the one who solved it, but the way Cdiscount, the SEO team, solved this problem was by allowing those people to create pages, but making sure they were all non-indexable. So what happens is that we end up not promoting categories, even though on Cdiscount, because of the new menu, which is completely hidden on the homepage. That's bad practice. We're promoting non-indexable categories, which isn't great because those are the ones we want to push. So internal linking only comes from the homepage, goes straight to products, and then has to work back up from there. So from the perspective of link distribution, it's really not ideal. It has to go all the way back up through the entire breadcrumb trail. Why not? That's fine. But it does mean that the crawler inevitably struggles a bit. It's more complicated than before when we could distribute things. There used to be a well-designed menu that linked to everything from the homepage, and then within each category stayed within the menu, which made things work pretty well. Now all the products are being pushed. Okay, as for them, Omnivai, they're not ranking too badly. After that, we have a few things that are interesting in directly there in the footer. So those are really going to be linked. But you see, everything that happens in the menu isn't. So unfortunately, it's not the best thing to promote. If anyone from the Cdiscount team, by the way, sees this video and has the answer to my questions, who wonders why, in fact, even though we have these things directly here, I'd be interested to know. To find out why, at this point, Cdiscount ends up being poorly linked. In this kind of situation, having made these strategic choices quite simply, why did you change the obfuscation system of the mega menu? Now, If I had to do one thing about this, I would start by completely deobfuscating it. The mega menu, which is currently in JS, I would open it up completely. I think Google has improved its crawling. I think it would be interesting to see how Google manages to navigate such a comprehensive menu and manages to crawl it. All of this would give more juice to the categories, etc. So I think that's quite interesting. And that's it. With that, I'll go ahead and wish you a good day, because this is the end of our little analysis about Sadie's count, about their obfuscated menu, which is no longer obfuscated now, which was a long-standing use case in SEO, about their search indexing, which has gradually lost its strength and is a bit less powerful than it used to be, a bit less innovative than it was back then, but still interesting because it's rarely used. And so there you have it. With that, I wish you all a great day. If you ever have any questions about your internal linking, your obfuscation, your internal search, or the SEO of your e-commerce site in general, don't hesitate to give us a call. It would be our pleasure. And if anyone from Cdiscount happens to see this video, feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to chat with you as well to better understand why you did things this way. Thank you all. Goodbye. This was Leo from Astra.